It's Saturday, June 8th. We are doing the Allegheny Portage Summit guided tour. Allegheny Portage Museum is right there. Got my Flight 93, which is a really cool place to check out. I highly suggest. It's about an hour south of here. I'm in pretty much Gallitzin. Gallitzin's pretty much over there. I'm behind the camera. See, I'm looking at it, but you guys can see it. But we're gonna go do the summit tour. It's about a 3.5 mile hike. They are doing a Staple Bend tour, and they're doing 6 to 10 tour, guided hiking tour. Check out their website for details on that. It's just Google Allegheny Portage Railroad. But yeah, let's go for a hike and check out the Allegheny Portage Railroad. Ski Arch Bridge, that was the Lemon House. This, I think, is on loan from the Baltimore Railroad Museum, the Lafayette. Just doing a quick walk through. There's actually a kind of like a replica, one of these at the Muncie Park that we went by on the West Branch. So you see the Erie Canal, you see the Erie Railroad right here, pretty much where my finger is. That's the Erie Railroad. That will be the New York Central up on top. Of course, this is now the Pittsburgh line. Excuse me. So there's a replica like this at Muncie. The other parks in this part of the state. Fort Necessity, Friendship Hill, Johnstown, Allegheny 93, which my shirt is. Staple Bend Tunnel. Now it's interesting, they didn't use the locomotives to the tunnel. They used horses, so they would turn the power there and head to the point they came from. So this was probably Johnstown to the Staple Bend Tunnel. The other side would have the same thing. We had like a turntable. It's quite interesting. Even though it's a tunnel, thinking maybe it's a railroad tunnel. No, it was part of the railroad, but the railroad engines never went through it. So they used horses.
Welcome to the Allegheny Portage Railroad.
So that's an overview.
A little bit over 3 miles. We're going to be hiking down to the engine house and lemon house, and then we're going to follow the trail out through the woods where the tracks have been for the railroad, pretty much over towards the area of Creston. And then we're going to stop there and turn back and hike back to the visitor center here. So probably, depending on how much time, probably maybe around 2 hours in total for the hike here. And yeah, so again, if anybody needs to use the restroom beforehand, this is your last chance before we get started on the hike. So if anybody has any questions, all right, we'll go ahead and get started and just head on down the boardwalk here. So I started working here in 2014 as a seasonal ranger, and then I got hired on a couple years ago as a permanent ranger. Oh, okay. Been here for almost historic area. So right behind us here, this is the engine house number 6 shelter. And it's referred to the shelter because this is not the original building. This was rebuilt by the Park Service to protect the original foundation of engine house number 6. So that's going to the west from the original engine house to the foundation side. And then you have behind me here this incline, the tracks going down there. This is incline number 6 of the Allegheny Portage Railroad. There were 10 inclines in total, and you can notice this when we go through the other side as well, but there were 2 different types of tracks on the portage. You can see here on the inclines, there's wooden tracks, and then on level 14 of the railroad, they use those big stone blocks or stone sleepers as tracks of the railroad. And the reason for that was the stone sleepers, they typically weigh between 300 and 400 pounds a piece. They're too heavy to be used on the inclines because they would have a tendency to shift downhill. So they have to put that track is not so to do that. Regular wooden railroad ties with an iron strap on the top of it for the inclines, and then the stone sleepers are on the levels. And at the bottom of the incline, near the bottom of the incline, which is here, is the skew arch bridge. So there's not being walked down to that today, but you can drive through it or walk through it down the trail here to have down the trail. And that was an original bridge that was built for the Portage Railroad as well. That's still standing. Now, just kind of a little bit of a background of the mainline canal and the Portage Railroad. In the early years of the country, terrible roads were the norm, and travel was very slow. And they were always constantly looking for better ways to improve travel, make it faster. And originally, after that, they would first thing that came along was canals, and they sped up travel pretty quickly. But for Pennsylvania, they didn't really have any canals that ran east to west. Most of their canals ran north to south. And so they wanted to build a canal from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh, running across the state east to west, to compete with the Erie Canal and the C&O Canal. And the Erie Canal was being built in New York in the 1820s, and then the C&O Canal was being built down in Maryland around that time as well. And the people in Pennsylvania were kind of worried that once those 2 canals were completed, that all this commerce and travel was going to pass Pennsylvania by, and they were going to miss out on all this possible revenue that's coming through, that would have been coming through the state. And so that's why they decided to build the mainline canal. And the routes that they chose, map here from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia. And basically from Pittsburgh, they followed the Allegheny into the Kissimmee. Yeah, once I pass the show it around, that's okay. Yeah, so they would follow from the Allegheny River from Pittsburgh into the Kissimmee River, and then into the Conemaugh River into Johnstown. And then once they got to Johnstown, they kind of had to figure out a way to get over the mountains, and they would eventually figure that out. We'll get to that later. And then from once they got over the mountain to Hollidaysburg, they would again follow the path of the river to the Susquehanna all the way to Columbia. And then that's kind of Columbia's southeast of Harrisburg. And then from Columbia to Philadelphia was the Columbia and Philadelphia Railroad to lead for the rest of the path. Now, once they started digging the canals in the late 1820s, they still really had no idea how they were going to overcome the mountain here. But they knew they had to start digging right away if they wanted to compete against the Erie Canal. They wanted to get the canals open as soon as possible. So they began construction on the mainline canal without knowing how they were going to overcome the mountain. They figured, well, once we get to the mountain, we'll just figure it out. So in 1824, they began a survey of the routes, and on that survey, they kind of came up with a few different ideas of how they were going to accomplish getting across or through the mountain here. And one of the ideas was to build a tunnel 4.4 miles long through the mountain. But at that time, no tunnel that long had been built in the United States, and that idea was met with much skepticism that they could actually accomplish that. And they also proposed to upgrade the existing turnpike that already ran over the mountain. And the turnpike was basically kind of like a dirt path that ran over the mountain. And that was right out back here where old Route 22 is. That's where the turnpike came up the mountain. Now it's known as the Cambria-Huntington Indiana Turnpike. So they were proposed kind of just upgrading that. But again, that was still going to be pretty slow. And the amount of goods that could be shipped using the turnpike would have been limited. So that was also kind of mixed. And then eventually they came up with the idea of building a railroad to cross the mountains. And then the routes that they decided upon came up through Blair's Gap here, and it came from Hollidaysburg up the mountain here, about 10 miles to the summit, and then it crossed the summit of the mountain, and it continued on 26 miles down the western side of the mountain all the way to Johnstown. So the total amount of path of the railroad was 36 miles from Hollidaysburg to Johnstown. And through building the railroad, they had to build it as an incline railroad, so it wasn't like a typical railroad. You would have a level portion of railroad, and then you'd come to an incline like this one right here. And there were 10 inclines in total on the Portage Railroad, 5 on this side of the mountain going down to Hollidaysburg, and 5 on the other side of the mountain going down to Johnstown. And at the top of each of these inclines, there would have been an engine house, kind of just like this one here. And to get the train cars up the inclines, back at that time, the steam locomotives were powerful enough to take the train cars directly up the inclines because they didn't have enough horsepower. They only could muster about 35 horsepower, which is pretty typical of like a riding lawnmower today. They couldn't really transport multiple train cars up the incline here. So what they did is they had 2 stationary steam engines in the engine house here, and there was a rope attached to those engines. And there would have been a hemp rope that ran all the way down the incline, all the way back up the incline again. And the train cars would have been attached to those hemp ropes, and they would have brought the train cars and canal boats up and down the inclines here at about 3 to 5 miles per hour. And then once they had the train cars and canal boats up the inclines, there would be a steam locomotive waiting for them on the other side of the engine house here to take them to the next incline, and then repeat the process all over again. And it took about roughly 4 to 5 hours to cross the mountain from Hollidaysburg to Johnstown. Things to pass around. So these are kind of some of the early advertisements that some of the canal companies used to get people to travel on their using their company, and it kind of lists the times, how long it took, and the prices there as well.
So what kind of size people?
So a lot of the raw material would have been transported east. So like coal, timber, iron ore, stuff like that. And then a lot of stuff coming back this direction would have been produce goods like clothing, food. And this is just kind of like a map of the just immediate area here of the area around incline number 6 and the Lemon House here as well, and the engine house. Typical workday back then, I would have been working from sundown basically, and so it'd take about 2 whole work days to make just one of these stone sleepers. But they did have hundreds of people working all at once, so they would be able to churn these out fairly quickly. And they needed about somewhere around estimates that I have seen somewhere around 300,000 were needed to be made for the entire length of the railroad. And then once they got the sleepers down here to attach the rails to the tracks, you can see there, well, you kind of can't see on here, but there would have been 2 holes drilled in the top of the sleeper here. And then this iron chair that holds the rail was placed over top of those 2 holes in the sleeper. And they would hammer down some wooden plugs and iron spikes into those 2 holes to hold the chair in place. And then the rail would sit right in the iron chair there. So that's kind of how they were able to assemble the tracks here for the railroad. And then again on the level portions of the railroad here, originally they didn't have steam locomotives for the first year of operation, so they had to use horses to pull the train cars on the level portions of the railroad. And then eventually they did get steam locomotives, and basically they're pretty primitive looking steam locomotives. So this is a picture of the one that's up in the visitor center there. These are what the locomotives would look like in operation back at that time. And then this model here was actually made for the World's Fair in Chicago back in 1893. So the model up there is over 100 years old, and it's on permanent loan to us to the Park Service.
Permanent loan.
Yeah, unless it's like somebody well, it's on loan from the C&O Canal the B&O Canal, B&O Railroad
The
down
Baltimore one,
down
yeah.
in Baltimore. So yeah, but if they ever want it back, I guess we'll have to return it to them. But so far, it's on permanent loan.
They got the money to move it. They can do it, I'm sure.
Yeah. And then one more thing I wanted to talk about. Yeah, the tracks. Okay, so that's pretty much it for here. So we'll continue on down the path here, past the Lemon House, and out the trace here. And then once we're on the way back, we'll end the hike in the Lemon House. Take a look around it.
There are doors and stuff like that, like we read about.
This is one of the original ones here that's maintained by the Park Service, and they were built so if there's like a stream or a water source that was flowing nearby, the water source could just flow directly underneath the tracks without impeding it and possibly running over the tracks as well. So a number of these were built for the Portage Railroad, and a number of them are still intact as well and preserved by the Park Service.
Now, does that culvert go all the way through?
It goes all the way through to the other side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that stone that it was made from?
Yeah, it would have been made from sandstone, the same type of stone that would have been used for the stone sleepers.
Yeah.
And there was plenty of stone quarries and sandstone deposits all throughout the mountain here, so they had a lot of material to work with. So when the Portage Railroad put out of business, the Pennsylvania Railroad tore up all the iron tracks, but they left the stone sleepers in place because it would have been too much work to remove them. They really had no use for them, so they just left them in place. And a number of people throughout the years, locals would come and remove some if they needed to use them for like building purposes. And so if you go through local communities, you can still sometimes see these stone sleepers in some people's yards as like yard decorations. So some locals still have them out and about.
Yeah.
And sometimes every once in a while, some of them will donate some back to the Park Service as well. So yeah, these are the original stone sleepers. And
The holes would be like right there. They'd be like right there.
Once we get past Crescent, a lot of where the old Portage was is now covered by a modern road, and it's likely that they didn't probably tear up the sleepers either, so they probably just paved over all the so there's quite a lot of them still buried out there as well underneath the pavement.
Wow.
When we walked the Staple Bend, we saw a bunch of them. There's US 22, or what I call New 22. If you get a quick glance and you're driving, if you're in the Gallitzin area, you take a quick look and you can see where the Allegheny Portage Railroad was, which we are walking on right here.
Number 6, we continue on down this road here for about another couple hundred feet, and then it would have come to incline number 5, and then we continued on down the mountain. But yeah, this area here, back at the time of the Portage Railroad, was known as Summitville, and this is kind of a layout of the area back at that time. So right where the road or the turnpike and the tracks intersect.
Okay.
Pass that around.
Yeah. So which way would the turnpike be?
Well, the turnpike would be is this road right here.
Yeah. Which?
Oh, it's turnpike right here.
Oh, okay.
So old 22. Yeah, it's right where the turnpike would be. Yeah, sure. So the town of Summitville here later became a resort town along the Pennsylvania Railroad and it would host wealthy men from Pittsburgh and their families. But back at the time at the Portage Railroad, there was a bunch of repair shops here to repair the engines and the ropes. And around around 1850, the population was around 400 people. And the Summit Hotel is right where this red building would be, right where the red building is standing right now. That's where the Summit Hotel would have been. So I have a picture of what it would look like. This is probably from around the 1970s, 1980s. So that's what the Summit Hotel used to look like. It would be right behind us right here. And the Summit Hotel, it opened in 1832 and served travelers from both the Turnpike and the Portage Railroad. It had 42 rooms, and then it sat at the intersection of the Turnpike and the railroad here, and it burned down in the 1980s when it accidentally caught fire, and it basically just burned the whole building down. Now, there was a famous opera singer who came through here during the time of the Portage Railroad. Her name was Jenny Lind, and this is a picture of her. She was one of the most famous opera singers in the world at that time. And she actually came through here, and they stopped the train at the intersection here at the Summit Hotel, and she actually performed a concert off the back of one of the train cars.
Oh, really?
So it's kind of hard to imagine now one of the most popular singers in America coming through here and doing a concert off the back of a train here. But that's kind of what happened back here at the time of the Portage Railroad.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And then, the engine house would have been, engine house number 5 would have been down there a couple hundred feet where the incline number 5 was. And then, that would have been continuing on down the mountain to Johnstown, roughly 26 miles the rest of the way. And then, that's pretty much it for the Summit Hotel, since unfortunately it's no longer, can't go inside or anything. But we can go ahead if you have any questions, so we can go ahead and turn back around and head back towards the park. And then I'll talk a little bit more about some of the accidents that happened on the Portage Railroad and some of the other famous travelers that traveled on the Portage Railroad. Be called out to attend to the victims of the accidents, and he's actually buried in the cemetery here behind me. And I have a few accounts of some of the accidents that he was at. So there is a newspaper account from the Hollidaysburg Register that said that there was a Mr. Samuel McNulty of Blairsville, Pennsylvania, met with a sad accident on the railroad near Lemons on Monday last. In attempting to jump from a coal car as it was passing along the summit level, he unfortunately fell, and one of his feet was caught beneath the wheels of the car and crushed to pieces. Dr. Christie was in attendance, but we have not learned whether it was amputated or not. And one more accident, which Dr. Christie was at.
Right on the spot.
On Wednesday last, a very serious accident occurred at Lemons Coal Bank on the summit. The rope of the car, in which 3 persons were descending into the mine, broke when they had been lowered within about 40 feet from the bottom. The car was smashed to pieces, and the men were all more or less injured, but none killed. Dr. James Christie was in attendance, from whom we learned that they are all recovering. Every attention was paid to the sufferers by Mr. and Mrs. Lemon. Now, just a few of the accidents that took place here on the Portage. Also down in the engine house number 6, the one that we came through, back in I think it's 1853, there was one of the boilers in there actually exploded, and it killed 3 of the workers that were operating the engines in there as well. And so there was another accident to add to Dr. James Christie. He was also there in attendance for that one as well. So there was probably, I believe, 5 workers in there at the time. So the other 2 that were in there were unharmed, but the 3 of them, 1 was killed instantly, and 2 died later from their injuries. And the Portage Railroad, they didn't really keep records of how many accidents and how many people were being killed or injured on the Portage Railroad. But looking back through old newspaper records, we've discovered that probably in the area of around 100 people were killed while traveling or working on the Portage Railroad, which for the time, I mean, the Portage Railroad was in operation for about 20 years, so that's not too bad. I mean, when you consider how many accidents take place now, over 20 years, only 100 people possibly were killed. So that's people. The Portage Railroad sometimes tend to people tendency to give a bad rap for being dangerous, but for the most part, it was able to be operated safely and without much incidents and accidents taking place.
That was a unique operation, though, so it's kind of like a experimental run.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, that's the railroad. The Portage Railroad was a unique, first of its kind railroad to be operated. So yeah, there were a number of difficulties that they had to overcome to operate it safely.
Right, it's the old rope that broke.
Yeah,
and
the
steel cable.
The hemp ropes. Yeah, they did sometimes have a tendency to break. But as far as I know, I've never seen an account of the wire rope breaking. But it's possible that is. But yeah, the wire, once they switched over to the wire rope, there were definitely a few fewer accidents. Yeah. Now, there were quite a few famous travelers that came through here on the Portage Railroad. We don't know for sure if any ever came to the Lemon House here, but we do know for sure that they traveled on the Portage Railroad. So I have some photos of them here. You can maybe you have a guess as to who some of these people are. If you know who they are, just...
That Dickens?
Yep. Dickens. Yeah, this is Charles Dickens. So he traveled on the railroad, and then he is traveled on the railroad, Portage Railroad, when he visited America in 1842. He was a famous author who wrote A Christmas Carol, Oliver Twist, Great Expectations, and A Tale of Two Cities. And he described his impressions of America in a book that he wrote called American Notes for General Circulation. In there, he included a powerful condemnation of slavery and also wrote down what he thought about traveling on the Portage Railroad. He said that he did enjoy his time traveling on the Portage, but he hoped that the state of Pennsylvania would come up with a faster way of getting across the state of Pennsylvania. And is
that together?
nope.
Buchanan?
No.
He looks like a president, though.
He ran for president three separate times, but was never elected.
Oh, that throws everything out in my head.
Taylor? No.
I mean, it could be a long, relative.
So that was Henry Clay. He was
Now I recognize the face.
He was a senator from Kentucky. He served as Speaker of the House and Secretary of the State. He ran for president 3 times in 1824, 1832, and 1844, but never won. And he was regarded as one of the most influential and important political figures of his time.
Okay, Abe Lincoln was with him or something, and when Abe was in Illinois or Kentucky or something like that.
Yeah, they crossed paths.
Yes, that's right.
Was he a senator or a congressman?
Yeah, he was a senator from Kentucky.
Okay. Claysburg is named after him. Claysburg, Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. Now that's a president.
Yeah.
I can't remember that one.
Is that
He looks too good to be Jackson.
Taylor? No.
No. No.
I should know them because I know some of the presidents.
Harris?
Who is it?
Yep, that's William Henry Harrison.
Harrison, okay.
He was the 9th president of the United States. He was the first president to die in office. His term lasted just 31 days. He stood in the rain for several hours, delivering his inaugural address and got pneumonia. He died on April 4th, 1841, 9 days after becoming ill. His body was then transported on the Portage Railroad back to his home in North Bend, Ohio.
Wow.
Yeah, shortest term president for sure.
So who took over from him?
Yeah, I'm not sure who succeeded him.
Whoever the vice president was at the time.
Yeah. Was Harrison the one they said Tippy Canoe?
No, I think that was Taylor. Zachary Taylor.
Tippy Canoe and Taylor too.
Yeah, that was Zachary
No, it was Tippy Canoe. I think was the whoever was president, and Taylor too.
Was the vice
He
president.
ran the vice.
Okay, I got you.
That face is familiar.
No.
And so this here is Zachary Taylor.
Oh, that's
Taylor, okay.
So he was the he was the 12th president of the United States, and he was the second president to die in office, and he died 16 months into his presidency. He died suddenly of a stomach disease on July 9th, 1850, and then his body was also transported on the Portage Railroad back to his hometown in Kentucky.
He ate too much on July 4th. Oh God, a general, I don't know.
This was Winfield Scott. He was an American military commander. He served in the U.S. Army from 1814 to 1861. So he took part in the War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, and the early stages of the Civil War. So he holds a record for greatest length of active service as a general in the United States Army.
Holy cow.
Yeah, he was head of the army, right?
Yeah, he was, started the Civil War, he was in charge, chief of staff, I think, or something like that, to Lincoln. Yeah, it's, probably wouldn't recognize this guy. He's missing a signature piece of his clothing that he usually wore, or supposedly usually wore.
Missing a wig?
No, it's something on his head that he's famous for wearing. This is Davy Crockett.
Davy Crockett.
Oh, okay. Oh, now, yeah, the coon hat, yeah. I've only seen pictures of him with the hat. Yeah.
Davy Crockett, didn't he die in the Alamo?
Yes, yeah. So before that, however, Crockett, he was an American folk hero, frontiersman, soldier, and politician. He represented Tennessee in the House of Representatives from 1833 to 1835. So that's when he traveled on the Portage Railroad, soon after voting. And then he was defeated for re-election and decided to take a group of volunteers to Texas as a rebellion was imminent there in the territory. And Davy and his men arrived at the Alamo Mission in San Antonio on February 8th, 1836, and then Davy and all the men defending the Alamo were killed in battle on March 6th.
Remember the Alamo.
He arrived when?
February 8th, 1836.
My brother's birthday.
They were all killed on March 6th, so about a month later.
Yeah.
Probably one of the least well-known guys that he worked on the Portage Railroad. He didn't travel on the Portage Railroad.
Was he a general?
Yeah, in the Civil War.
Yeah.
Once you say the name, I'm going to remember it.
Longstreet? It's not Longstreet.
No.
He fought for the Union.
Yeah, okay.
That ain't Grant for sure.
No. He was at Gettysburg, though. He served in the Union Army at Gettysburg.
I want to say Meade. That's the only one I can think of off the top of my head.
Union. He was head of the Confederacy.
That's right.
That was John White Geary. He was a supervisor on the Portage Railroad. In 1846, he served as a lieutenant colonel in the Mexican-American War, and then he later go on to serve as the first mayor of San Francisco, and he also took part in the Civil War. He was eventually promoted to division commander in the 12th Corps of the Army of the Potomac, and he was at the Battle of Gettysburg, where his troops were deployed on Tulsa and saw very fierce fighting there. And then the 12th Corps was eventually transferred west, and they fought in the Battle of Chattanooga. Gary's son Edward was also with him there. He served in his division as an artillery officer. However, Gary's son Edward was shot, and he died in his father's arms at the Battle of Chattanooga. He would later take part in the Atlantic campaign and Sherman's March to the Sea, and then after the war, he served 2 terms as governor of Pennsylvania. And then less than 3 weeks after leaving office, he died of a heart attack.
Oh, wow.
And then
Was Gary was his last name?
Gary, yes. Yeah, Geary. And then
What was his first name?
John.
John Gary.
Yep.
Okay.
And then there's also a monument now that is dedicated to him that's on Coltsville at Gettysburg.
We were just there in February. I'll have to look for that.
This is probably, well, I won't say, probably maybe one of the most well-known besides Charles Dickens that traveled on the Portage Railroad. This is a depiction of him when he was much younger, though, so you might not recognize him.
Alrighty.
Now, he's also a Civil War general.
Mm.
Fought for the Union. That was him when he was younger. Now I'll show you a picture of him when he was older. Probably.
Grant.
Grant.
Whoa.
Is that when he was no?
Yeah,
It looks like he was in the military there.
Yeah, that was when he was a cadet at West Point.
Yeah, okay.
And then this was later on taken during the Civil War.
Yeah, and then he got out and became a lawyer.
Yep.
He was a lawyer
He
for a while.
served the
And
Mexican
successful.
War.
Yes, he also served in the
Yeah,
Mexican
I
War
remember.
as well.
Yeah.
Mark Twain did his biography. He helped because he was broke and all that. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, Grant traveled on the Portage Railroad when he was on his way to the West Point Military Academy. He was born Hiram Ulysses Grant, but there was a mix-up in his paperwork with the academy, and that's how he got the name Ulysses S. Grant. Yeah.
What was his first name?
Hiram.
Hiram.
Ulysses Grant was his full name.
Okay, Hiram Ulysses.
There's a college in Johnstown, Hiram Andrews. Or Yeah.
Hiram H.
that's a rare name.
Yeah, it's not too common. And then, so he would go on to serve in the Mexican-American War and also the Civil War, where he won many victories in the Western Theater, and he eventually became commander of all the Union Army during the Civil War.
Yeah.
And then Grant would face off against Lee, in which he would force him to surrender Appomattox, and then Grant would go on to become the 18th President of the United States and serve 2 terms in office.
Yeah. And people complained about him drinking, and Lincoln said, well, give all my generals.
Exactly. Yeah, find out. Now, to kind of wrap up with the end of the Portage Railroad here, the work began on what they call the New Portage Railroad, which was designed to bypass the inclines and be a much faster way of getting over the mountain, and that sort of began in 1851. And in 1852, new Portage contracts were written up, and it would cost about $2.1 million to construct the New Portage Railroad over the mountain. In 1852, the first section of the New Portage was complete, and it began bypassing the first of the inclines. And in 1855, the New Portage was complete, and all the inclines were bypassed. And by bypassing the inclines, it would be better both for business and safety, since you wouldn't have all the accidents with the inclines and having to uncouple the train cars and come up the incline and on the train again. So it was much faster. But by that point, it was kind of a little bit too late, as we'll get to here with the Pennsylvania Railroad. And the state of Pennsylvania was still in debt from building the mainline canal. And steam locomotives in general had more horsepower by this time. And the Pennsylvania Railroad was laying their tracks across the state by February of 1854. And they overcame the mountain using the Horseshoe Curve and the Gallitzin tunnels. Picture of the curve here.
The train actually then became like a transported things rather than the canal and.
Yes, mainly it's become all train, which is just a train car kind of just bypassing. That's a
2% degree, 2 degree
Great.
grade. That's what it had to be for the trains to make it up.
They wanted to make a bridge from one end to the other, but they realized the incline would have been pretty much like that.
Yeah.
So they followed the Indian path up the mountain.
And then that's a picture of the Gallitzin tunnels there as well, shortly after they were built.
That's the one Bob's gotten at the end. That's the one that's abandoned now.
Yeah.
The Allegheny is what they made it higher and wider for. Some houses are right on top of the tunnel. I hope there's no, what they call sinkhole somehow.
And then in June of 1857, the Pennsylvania Railroad bought the main line, the whole main line, all the canals and all the railroads from Philadelphia to Pittsburgh for $7,500,000. And then the Pennsylvania Railroad continued to operate the forge until 1858, until eventually closing it down and completely dismantling it. The rails that were still in good condition were sent to be used for the building of the Pittsburgh, Fort Wayne, and Chicago Railroad. And then that was pretty much the end, unfortunately, of the Portage Railroad. Lasted a little over 20 years, with the old Portage lasting 20 years, and then the new Portage about 3 years there towards the end. But eventually the Portage Railroad came along with bigger and better steam locomotives, and unfortunately made the Portage Railroad obsolete.
So that pretty much concludes the summit guided tour here at Allegheny Portage Railroad. It's about 4:15, so it was a little over 2 hours, which isn't bad considering, just a little bit of information and the walking. Yeah, so I highly recommend coming out here. I've been here quite a few times. I've done the van tour. I want to do that again. I've done the Ghost Stories tour over at Staple Bend Tunnel. I've been to Staple Bend Tunnel a couple times. So yeah, it's definitely worth it to come out and see what history is that you probably didn't even know about, that they don't really teach you in school. But yeah, thanks for coming along, guys. Catch you on the next one. Oh, and before I forget, fix my hair all the time. Before I forget, please donate spare change, even $1, $1.02, whatever, into their donation box right inside the door to the left. The money there goes toward the park here. I mean, it is free, yes, but it's always nice to give a little bit of extra money to help the park service, because I'm sure it takes a lot of money to keep these parks beautiful for us to enjoy, for people across the world. I heard the guided tour gentleman said he's had people from Europe and Asia, so probably that money will help make sure that people from around the world see how beautiful we keep our parks. So if you can, please donate. That would greatly appreciate it, for sure. But yeah, so please, I do every time I come visit, because I prefer this park in this present state. So please donate. If you guys like these videos of trains and history stuff, don't forget to like and subscribe. They're at the bottom below my video. And also check out my links to donate to help with my adventures. I don't make any money pretty much off of the links. It's just to help with gas and, help you basically make more videos just like these. So if you could, that'd be greatly appreciated. Bye, guys.